My name is Sarah Dowd, for people that haven't met me before. I'm the General Manager of the 2 commercial towers here at Freshwater Place, being 2 South Bank Boulevard and 28. I begin by paying my respects to the local Indigenous people of the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting upon today. Please note, everyone, that this session is being recorded to be mindful if you engage in conversation. As part of International Women's Day engagement, we provided this thought-provoking book written by Duncan, Accelerating Women to You as a valued community member, as a leader and as influencers. We hope you've had the chance to read it. We purposely gave you a few weeks to be able to read the book before this session. And a few of you said that you're getting into the book. So it obviously took a long time to write, and we're making sure people are actually reading it, Duncan. Today's session is quite special to actually have Duncan give his time to talk to us. So welcome, Duncan, and thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I mean, it was a really small world moment when both VMware and Penguin are part of your building complex. So, and we connected as part of that. So really appreciate your support.
Wonderful. Now, in starting this session, I want to be completely honest, which is I always am. When I was reading this book, I really reflected on myself as a property sort of professional, as a leader of a team. I thought about my team, I thought about my company, I thought about my industry as a whole in property. And I definitely reflected on the fact that my industry in particular has evolved a huge amount over the last 5 years. Obviously, we've had 2 years of sort of pandemic influence that no one has really seen before. But in property, you know, workplace equity, inclusion are critical for talent attraction, for innovation and performance. We've actually developed a top 10 global commercial real estate trends in 2022 report. And I'm actually going to send a copy of that to our community members. But a lot of the themes in your book actually related very closely to some of the themes actually in my workplace about creating safe places, engaging places. And I actually found that whilst the core focus of your book was accelerating women, there were so many stories and techniques that really related to a whole modern approach in business and in maintaining and influencing a very gender diverse social and geographic community background. So whilst it's great, the actual core focus, it's a really wonderful all-round business book, Duncan.
Well, I think, the first thing is the research is actually irrefutable now around inclusion and the difference that makes to have everyone be able to bring their authentic self to work. And I sort of frame it around, if you're worried about things or you're not feeling included, you've got this thing going in the back of your head that's holding you back. And if that's going in the back of your head holding you back, then you're not able to contribute all the skills that you have to bring into the workplace. And in some way, COVID helped because it sort of it put a spotlight on having to work differently. And then we discovered a whole lot of other challenges around working from home and all the benefits that come from social interaction. So, you know, it was a reflective process. I was saying before, I wrote it over about a 2.5 year period. And I've had 35 years of leading teams. So it's across 30 different countries. So you get a different appreciation on the way through. Well, I'm glad the initial reading has helped.
Yes, and the other thing that I've always tried to do is always step into somebody else's shoes. So, you know, think of my tenants, my contractors, the team, and sort of understand their perspective. But what I also took from this book was that thinking about the really small actions that I was taking or the small messages that I was delivering in everyday actions. That was something that I hadn't really ever thought about before. One of the theories that you spoke about was making sure that every interaction or everything that you were doing was being consistent and authentic. So you couldn't be up on stage presenting one thing and not showing that actually in your day-to-day working. I did ask some of the attendees to send through some questions for you, so not to put you on the spotlight too much.
But you are going to put me on the spot, so go for it, Sarah.
So the first one I think is a really simple
And by the way, just so everyone knows, I didn't get any of these in advance, so.
Wonderful. So what was your driving inspiration around the topics of this book, and what did you personally get from it, and how did it enrich your career?
So I think the first thing was I was reasonably fortunate. I think it's 18 years ago now, where I inherited a team of 15 leaders, and of those 15 leaders, 13 were women. And so that sort of meant I had to learn actually a different management technique around leading a team of largely women. And the first thing was to shut up and not try and, I'm an engineer, so engineers are hopeless. We want to fix things and learn not to fix things, actually to listen longer and just be there and be available. So that became quite a changing experience for me because I had to change given the makeup of the team. Now, not many people go through that experience. Most workplaces still are actually only in the 20 to 25% women. And so to have a team that was 85%, I was lucky, and I had, I guess, a formative experience for those 2 years. The second thing was actually 4 years ago, in 2018, I was in a session in Bangalore for women in technology. And we had 250 women in the room, and I was on stage for 90 minutes asking questions just like you, Sarah. But I can tell you, Indian women ask lots of difficult questions, and they've got no fear. They just ask. And so that, I was on stage for about 90 minutes, and I was flying back from Bangalore that night, and I was really bothered because one of the questions was, I've got a daughter, should she join the IT industry, or is it not a future-proof industry for someone to join? That and lots of other questions. So I wrote this idea at 2:30 in the morning because I couldn't sleep on the plane, and that idea was around, can we do more to include women in the workplace? Can we change the way we operate? So that idea became a program called TARA. And today that program in India is designed to help women return to work. So it provides mentoring, provides free enablement for where they've taken a career break for children, parents, enable them return to work. So we today have helped now 4,000 women return to work. And we have 18,500 women in the program and 47 million social media views. So that completely changed my perspective around what's possible just from that idea written on a plane on April 14 in 2018. I wrote the idea, so sponsored it. Made me realise there's actually a lot we can do. So, and then my team asked me, well, if you've had that experience, why don't you write down all your other tools and approaches and the stories and make it available? So that's, now we have a book.
Oh, wonderful. And I guess one of the other questions that I found quite interesting is that you spoke about leaders having very different views of this topic. So some are looking at it as a strategic change, some are looking at it as a target, some just want to appear to be making inroads, some of them see it as future action if it actually works in well with their sort of business strategy. So really varied approaches with really varied results. The focus on bringing people outside their comfort zone can be really uncomfortable. People like to sort of operate the way they've been operating. Mm-hmm. So if there's a reluctance or there's a bit of poor results on, say, a leader, but overall everything that else they're doing is quite good. They've got good intentions, but not good follow through. In the war for talent, a simple change of leader isn't really realistic. So what would be your advice for the manager or the leader of that leader?
This partly comes of 35 years of experience. At the end of the day, even if all the business results are good, you're going to hit a ceiling on performance. And the reason you hit a ceiling on performance is 50% of society is women. So, I had a leader who was my best performing leader, and we had gender diversity down to 9% of the team because he simply wasn't inclusive. So even with my best performer, and then over time, that best performer hits a ceiling on performance because you're not leveraging all the available talent. 9% is terrible. And I ended up replacing him. And the new leader coming in had a different perspective, more inclusive. We suddenly were able to attract a whole segment of the marketplace that was being ignored in terms of talent. And it went from 9 to 15 in a year. And you can see the plans in place for that leader and the culture they drive being much more inclusive, not just around women, but being more inclusive in the way they approach. And so, the data's out there. It's, there's plenty of people who've proved around inclusivity and diversity in a team drives higher performance, significantly higher performance. So my advice is you either change them and get them to change their approach, or you change them and get someone else.
Good tagline, Duncan. I like that. Now, what did you personally learn in writing this novel? So not necessarily about the topic, it was more they wanted to understand what you learned from writing it.
Well, the first thing I learned is it's not an easy task. I have a whole different appreciation of what it takes to write a book. I was just saying to Irene just beforehand, I went through 3 rounds of editing with Penguin. On the first round, they came back and said, you need to write more. It wasn't long enough. And on the second round, they said, here's the things you need to change. And it was 100 hours of work, and I had 12 days to get it done, on top of working. So I had a whole new appreciation of what it actually takes to try and write a book and bring one to fruition. It was about a year, actually, even from signing the contract to getting it published and into the marketplace. It also, I guess, the more I wrote about it, I realised how it's all connected. So what the things you do as an individual, and then what you do with your team, and then what you do as an organisation, and then what you do out in the community is all connected. So I would say my experience of the TARA program that we created, we learned a whole lot of things around confidence. And the challenge, the number one thing is not actually about skills around enabling women to return to work. It was about confidence. And it turned out that issue around confidence was much, much broader than just returning to work. It was actually evident in all of our workplace as an organisation, as a leader of a team, and around how I support women that work for me. And so that probably, it's all connected, I think, is the biggest challenge. Because if you're inconsistent, what you do and what you say, if that's inconsistent, you automatically have taken 2 steps backwards. And so overall, and the reason I wrote this, I actually think we're at a unique point in time across most industries where there's a willingness to improve diversity. There's just the how. And I think people are struggling on the how. So this is really a book about how. And that's why there's lots of stories in it to try and make it easy to understand, to relate to something.
Yeah, I like in the book you constantly refer to sort of either other authors or other techniques, and it's almost like you're giving people like ideas, but then also giving them further homework for them to go off and to explore other areas. So I quite liked that part of the book. Now, one of the questions I had from one of the people actually in the room, so that's nice to actually see people in person these days. You mentioned fake feminists in the Sustaining the Organisational Change chapter. What advice would you have for managing these types of individuals?
Well, and I think this is where I come to the conclusion it's a strategic change on establishing an inclusive or diverse environment. Because there's too many where it's a project, so therefore, like any good project plan, there's 6 steps you've got to complete, and who owns the step and when have they got to complete by. And where I see fake feminists is they were ticking the boxes. What's the action I need to do? Okay, I'll send out a communication that says we're an inclusive group. I've ticked the box, it's done. And nothing is further from the truth. And so you'd see someone get up on stage and say, you know, we want a really diverse environment and we want to be inclusive. And then they come off stage and then they go and talk to the guys in the corner and not actually talk to the whole team. So everything on stage is immediately disconnected from the behaviour, and you wonder why the environment doesn't improve. So I think that piece around it's connected becomes really important. And then it's a long-term change program. We've had organisations running this way with this sort of diversity for generations. So to make that change, you need to be thoughtful around how it connects together. And I'm genuinely worried around people treating it as a project where they, you know, project plan, tick off, and we all have projects, but it's broader than that. And therefore you need to think about it broader than that.
I think even if I reflect back to sort of property and when sustainability first started being spoken about as being important, it was very much a tick the box at the start. So you had a certain ABGR or neighbours rating or whatever ratings you know, are used around different countries, and tenants, and especially government tenants, wouldn't go to a building unless it had a certain star. So suddenly you saw this in other company briefs, but there wasn't really that strong commitment on sustainability. Now sustainability is part of every decision making. It's a key part of business strategy. So it moved from being a tick the box into being something that is very much part of what companies live and breathe. I don't see that that's necessarily what's happened with inclusion and equity on a larger scale, but I can see the inroads that are being made in companies. So obviously with, you know, VMware and, you know, the project, the Tara project that you ran, and even just seeing, you know, the teams that you have in your Melbourne office here, you can see the progress and the senior female leaders that are doing quite well. So hopefully our other tenants who are all in very senior leadership positions, so CEOs, CFOs, managing directors, we hope that they take the opportunity to actually read these parts of the book and really reflect on the areas that they can work on in their companies and talk to their sort of senior team.
Well, because this is where, I mean, if you're running an organisation, so remember I was the MD running VMware for Asia Pacific and Japan. So I had 3,500 people spread over 30 plus countries. And so, you know, challenges managing across cultures, across languages. So you actually need a strong management system. And even down to, I ran a quarterly business review around what the diversity was, with one set of data coming out of the HR system. Now, the good news is most HR systems can give it to you now. But then you start looking at, so what have we hired? What have we promoted? And what are we losing? And then what does it look like by level? And so rather than someone turning up and, you know, the fake feminist turns up with 50 PowerPoint charts to the review to run down the clock. If you've ever played basketball, you run down the clock. because they've got so many charts to get through, you never actually get to the data. We actually put a process in around a quarterly review of gender diversity, starting from the data, and then what have you done for hiring, what have you done for promoting, and what have you done for retaining? Because you don't need a leaking bucket. If you hire 30% and you're losing 30%, you don't go forward. Then you have an environment issue that's causing such high attrition. So, but that's, you know, as a leader of organisations, you actually need quite a disciplined management system in place to make a change and know whether you're getting better or not.
Well, that's one of the other key things you spoke about is sort of feedback, whether it's good, bad or neutral, but also finding out information or things that are hidden. So, you know, in creating that safe space and actually having people come forward and tell you what they actually think, I don't think that often happens. I think people, they just want to go about their day and they don't necessarily want to get involved. And then you do have people that leave and don't provide you that feedback. So I think one of the key things that I would say is making sure that we ask the questions and not just rely on HR data, because I can often think that it doesn't really show the true nature of a situation. I think people are also good at putting on a certain front and not showing what's really happening. So I think especially a lot of working women that I know, and especially they don't have to be mothers, but some that are mothers, they really are trying really hard to do a good job. They don't want to create waves, and so they'll put up with something rather than say that they don't think it's appropriate or they don't think it's the best way to be inclusive.
And I think that, you know, that concept of a trusted space becomes really important. So you actually get honest feedback, because unfortunately our HR system is like an accounting system. It tells you after the event what happened. It doesn't actually give you real-time data of what's happening. And actually, I'll give you a simple one around working mothers. I had one of my leaders who had 2 children under 5. And I mean, for those who've had kids, then the challenge between about 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. at night, witching hour, when, you know, feeding, they're tired at the end of the day. So she was based in New Zealand and she was in one of my team meetings. And this is one of the techniques that I think is really useful around virtual meetings. You can manage a chat session under a meeting to be inclusive. So I went out to and said, so Paula, I think this is a point where I'd like you to comment around this experience you've got. And if you've got a trusted relationship, she come back and said, it's witching hour. My husband's lost it. He's not coping with the kids. The kids have lost it. They're screaming. I can't turn on video or sound or you'll be deafened with these screaming kids. So the good news is, one is in a virtual environment, you can ask the question, please, can you contribute, so you can be inclusive. The second, if you've got a trusted environment, she can tell you what's really going on. So I said to Paula, just put a chat comment in. Don't open up your video. Don't open up the sound. And so she added a comment into the chat session and was seen to be inclusive. But you've got to be understanding. I mean, I've got 3 kids that are in their 20s now, so. But real environment, it happens. So what do? You know, Irene's got 2 sick kids at home. The video goes off, mute the mic because she's got to deal with something. I've had a CEO as a grandmother where a 2-year-old wandered into frame and started tugging on her arms, and she goes, she needs to go to the bathroom. I've got to go. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think COVID has actually brought that whole personal life more into the everyday. So I had to be in isolation like many people and had my headphones on and had 2 little people sitting next to me, and they regularly were part of many of my team's meetings. I think most of my everyday sort of clients had seen them regularly. They joined every sort of Monday morning team meeting. So I actually think in a way there's some actual positives that have come out of the last 2 years that have sort of opened up the norms. Even the working from home, I must admit, I love coming into the office. I love the buzz of being out of my home environment. But I do really reflect on the fact that you can work from home if you need to juggle, and people aren't going to sort of think twice about it or assume that, you know, you're not going to be working. One of the questions that I did have was from a working mum, and she said that some of her sort of friends think the juggle of a career and their family seems like the too hard basket. So I think it goes along the line, Duncan, of a confidence. It's not necessarily that they don't have the skills, but they're lacking the confidence. So I know that you mentioned in the Tara program that you had sort of a wellbeing and a confidence area. What are some of the techniques and tools that were sort of taught in that program?
That was actually one of the things that came up around no one's superhuman. They can't do everything. And so finding ways to cope, and, you know, you mentioned Sarah being Catholic, so the old Catholic guilt thing actually occurs in every culture. So there's just different versions of it in each culture, but, you know, you can't do everything. So then how do you, you know, which bits do you outsource, which bits do you do? And I think one of the things you learn as a CEO managing a large team is you will drop things. There is no physical way that I could do everything. So you learn what you can drop, and sometimes you don't get it right. Hopefully it's not, you don't drop the kids on the floor, but, you know, that piece around you can't do everything. So then how to manage that becomes really important. And then what works for you? I mean, I'm in awe of women who manage to both work full time and, you know, one of the things we've learned during COVID is have a predominant care of the home environment as well. Now, some things have actually changed over the last 2 years where, you know, men have had to step up and be part of it, whether it's cooking, cleaning, dropping kids, staying at home, because they've actually been there. I'm unfortunately not a great example because I was away 200 days a year on the road in a plane for the last, you know, 16 years. So fortunately, you know, but you need to work through how to balance it, what you can get done and what you can't. But one of the advantages I've just moved back from Singapore is you do have the ability to access affordable home care and home support, which is much more difficult in Australia.
Yeah, that's right. I think that as one of the questions that came through was, as a non-business leader, how do you advise, what advice do you give me to be able to support and accelerate women in the workforce? So this is from someone who doesn't believe they have sort of a leadership role, but they still want to be supporting and accelerating women. What would be your advice?
I mean, I think the thing that surprised me, just being involved. So we started a community effort called Tara that we've talked about, and then the number of people who volunteered their time to be part of it, it's incredibly enriching. We've actually just, as VMware, just announced another program to help people with disabilities return to the workforce as well, with a goal to help 1,000 people in the next 2 years actually enter the workforce. But that volunteer your time, be involved, and it's a tremendous learning experience. Now, I'm fortunate as a leader, I have access to resources and money and influence. Yeah, so that makes a difference, because if someone says, well, we need to be able to do this, actually, I'll give you a real example. Google Ads. I never realised the power of Google Ads. It turns out they're incredibly well suited to targeting, you know, women who are online between 9 and 11 in the morning, Monday to Friday. We were able to target off 5 keywords, but I think the main thing is being involved, because when you get involved, then you bring ideas and experiences into a team. And when you bring ideas and experiences, it's amazing the diversity, the value that helps. That Google Ads came from a communications lady who was not actually, she's not a leader, not a business owner, but said, I've got an idea, I think this might work. Now, I could fund it because I was the CEO, so I could choose to fund it, but that's where being involved, more than anything else, it's a rewarding experience.
Well, I also think as a leader, you can't do it all. So if you don't have that groundswell happening, the change isn't going to flow through. So I actually think the non-leaders are sometimes even more important than the actual leadership group. So you want them to get on board and to be excited and to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, we're a great supporter of mentoring and sponsoring women in everyday life in our community. We want to build a better and sustainable future. That means being inclusive, looking at sustainability. We want the success of our tenants and their businesses. Like I stalk all of them on LinkedIn and look at what they're doing, and it's very exciting. We like to create a very warm business environment. So I hope that everyone takes a bit of inspiration and some useful tools from Duncan's book, but also to share your own stories, because I think that's the key in Duncan's book, is having stories to sort of help deliver those meaningful messages and to create that sort of strategic change and goals. So I'd like to sincerely thank Duncan for his time. I'm hopeful that when he does come to Melbourne, we can catch up in person, so I can thank you in person. But thank you very much. And if you do have any questions for Duncan, unfortunately, I know his email address and I can always shoot him an email now. So please let me know if you have any questions and I'll feed them through. Maybe they'll be for book 2, Duncan.
Well, I think this piece around stories is really, really important. People learn and listen because stories generate emotion, and when they generate emotion, it generates memories. So it's one of the things, regardless of which industry, there are experiences within your complex and people within your complex that almost certainly have been through the issue that you're trying to solve. And so being able to tap into that, and I'm having this issue, or being able to tell a story, then people can relate to it and say, oh, but if you're going through that, you do know that so-and-so's already solved that problem. Now, living in Singapore, it's a little island. It's only 1 degree of separation in the business community anyway. But, Melbourne's always had a really good connected community, and, the people around you actually are a tremendous asset. So I applaud you, Sarah, for trying to pull that community together.
Wonderful. Well, enjoy your settling in, moving in that you're doing at the moment. That always makes me cry. I don't think I'm ever moving again. So good luck with that all. And again, thank you, Duncan, and thank you everyone that was able to join today. And obviously we'll make this available for the people that have asked for a copy as well. So thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you, everybody.